There's a moment, quiet and nearly imperceptible, when life begins whispering that something is approaching, something vast, unknown, transformative. It doesn't knock loudly, it doesn't announce itself with fanfare. Instead, it emerges through subtle friction, an internal unrest, a persistent nudge, a vague sense that things can't remain the same. And in that stillness, the question arises: if something enormous is about to unfold in your life, are you truly ready to receive it? Most people believe they're prepared for transformation because they desire it. But desire is not readiness. Wanting something and being energetically aligned to hold, live, and sustain that something are entirely different vibrational frequencies. Napoleon Hill once warned that unstructured desire is one of the greatest creators of internal conflict. You may want abundance, love, purpose, but if your nervous system is conditioned for survival, fear, or scarcity, you will unconsciously resist the very things you claim to want. Think of a vessel. A container that holds water must be stable, unbroken, and open. What happens when your internal vessel is cracked by trauma, conditioned beliefs, or silent guilt? Can it hold joy? Can it hold expansion? Manifestation, in its truest form, is not about acquiring more. It is about becoming someone new who can carry more. In this video, we're going to explore not just what is coming into your field, but who you need to become to let it stay. Through deep truths, uncomfortable revelations, and unexpected insights, we'll walk together into the silence between what you want and what you are, because that is where everything begins. When you ask the universe for something, it first asks you, are you ready to become who that requires? It often begins with a longing, a silent plea rising from within, shaped not by words, but by the sensation of more fulfillment, more peace, more freedom. Something you may not even know how to name, but you feel its absence like a subtle ache in your chest. And so, you ask. You write your intentions. You visualize. You affirm. But in the sacred language of the universe, every request for expansion is answered not with a gift, but with an invitation. An invitation to grow into the version of you that can sustain what you asked for. The universe does not operate on the timeline of human impatience. It doesn't withhold out of cruelty. It waits for resonance. What you desire requires a version of you that does not yet exist, not because you're unworthy, but because what's coming carries a frequency that would collapse under the weight of your current fears, doubts, or outdated patterns. This is the silent irony of manifestation. You don't receive what you want. You receive what you're an energetic match for. Your inner reality becomes the blueprint. Let's reflect on what readiness actually means. Readiness is not the performance of spirituality. It is not how many crystals you own or how often you meditate. It is not found in the books on your shelf or the mantras you repeat at sunrise. Readiness is integration. It is who you are when no one is watching. It is how you respond when your nervous system is triggered, when old fears resurface, when life tests your identity. And life will test you, not as punishment but as preparation. The universe, in its infinite wisdom, asks one fundamental question when you request abundance, love, or transformation. Are you willing to let go of the version of you that cannot sustain this? Because if you are not willing to release the safety of the known, even if the known is painful, you will continue circling the same experiences under new disguises. There is a hidden grief in growth, a quiet death that takes place when you finally outgrow the patterns that once protected you. You may mourn the person you've been for decades. You may feel unsteady as the scaffolding of your old identity begins to dissolve. This is not a regression. This is initiation. Like the caterpillar dissolving into formlessness before it emerges with wings, your breakdown is not the opposite of your breakthrough. It is its prerequisite. Carl Jung once wrote that, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Most of what blocks our manifestations are not external obstacles, but internal agreements we made in silence. Agreements to not shine too brightly, to not ask for too much, to stay small, to remain loved. These are not beliefs. They are energetic contracts, and unless they are brought to the surface, they will continue to override even the most disciplined intentions. So, how do you become ready? Not in theory, but in practice. Readiness is found in the body, in the willingness to sit with discomfort without numbing it, in the capacity to breathe through anxiety without letting it dictate your next action, in the discipline to return to stillness, even when the mind screams for control. True readiness is spiritual maturity. It is the humility to recognize that what you desire will demand your evolution. And it is the courage to step into that evolution willingly. Sometimes, the universe delays what you ask for, not because you're doing something wrong, but because it loves you too much to give you what would collapse your current sense of self. It is not just asking if you want more, it is asking if you are willing to become more. The relationship you crave will ask you to release the identity formed in loneliness. The abundance you seek will invite you to heal the parts of you still married to scarcity. The purpose you long for will demand that you stop abandoning yourself. Imagine holding something beautiful, delicate, sacred. Now imagine trying to hold it with hands still shaped by trauma, guilt, or self-doubt. It would slip through your fingers, not because you're not enough, but because your container is still being rebuilt. You are not being punished. You are being prepared, and the preparation is always more important than the arrival. You see, manifestation is not about summoning miracles. It is about preparing your life to become the environment where miracles can root and grow. Just like a seed needs soil, light, and time, your dreams need the nourishment of consistency, alignment, and emotional regulation. They don't bloom under pressure. They bloom in coherence, and coherence only emerges when the heart, mind, and energy are speaking the same language. This journey is not about becoming worthy. You have always been worthy. It is about becoming available, energetically, emotionally, spiritually available. That's what the universe is really asking when you send out your desires. Are you willing to become the version of yourself who no longer needs to chase this, but simply allows it? This chapter of your life is not about hustling harder or forcing outcomes. It's about attuning your vibration to what already wants to find you. What if instead of proving yourself, you simply started preparing yourself? What if readiness became your practice? Not perfection, not performance, just presence. In this presence, the energy begins to shift. You no longer beg, you embody. You no longer wish, you become. And that is when the universe responds, not because you demanded it, but because in silence, you finally matched it. The invisible performance of spirituality. How pretending to be aligned blocks the real flow of life. Somewhere along the journey of personal transformation, the pursuit of spiritual growth begins to merge with the performance of it. What once was a raw and sacred inner calling becomes, slowly and unconsciously, an aesthetic, a display, a language adopted, a posture assumed. And before we realize it, we are no longer manifesting from authenticity, we are manifesting from identity. This silent performance of being awake, high vibe, or in alignment becomes a mask. And masks, no matter how radiant, block the breath of life from reaching the soul. It's tempting to believe that if you look the part, if your speech is laced with the right affirmations, if you meditate every morning, if you share spiritual quotes and practice gratitude, then surely the universe will meet you with what you desire. But the universe does not respond to appearances. It responds to vibration. And no matter how polished your practice may be, if it's not rooted in truth, it echoes with the frequency of dissonance. There's a deep fatigue that comes with spiritual performance. Because when your outer life declares one thing, but your inner world speaks another, your nervous system bears the burden of maintaining the illusion. You may look peaceful, but inside you are flooded with doubt. You may sound grateful, but secretly you're afraid nothing is ever enough. You may preach surrender, but behind the words lives a frantic need to control. This isn't hypocrisy, it's a trauma response. It's what happens when the soul yearns for connection, but the ego takes over to protect the wound of not being enough. And in a world that rewards appearance over essence, we've learned to spiritualize our insecurities, to mask fear with positivity, to use light to hide the shadow. Carl Jung warned that what we fail to confront within ourselves will inevitably rule our lives from the unconscious. This is no less true on the spiritual path. In fact, it is especially true here, because the more spiritual language we acquire, the more easily we can rationalize our avoidance. Everything happens for a reason becomes a shield from grief. Just trust the process becomes an excuse for inaction. I'm manifesting becomes a distraction from addressing our own resistance. But the universe cannot be fooled. Energy doesn't lie. When you pretend to be in alignment, you send out a fractured signal. It confuses the field. One part of you is saying yes, while another part is whispering no, and the result is often stagnation, not because you're being punished, but because the frequency you're emitting lacks coherence. Manifestation requires coherence, a unified field of thought, emotion, and belief. There is nothing wrong with wanting to feel better. There is nothing wrong with reaching for the light. But when light becomes a costume, it loses its power to transform. True spiritual growth is not about bypassing the pain. It's about transmuting it. It's not about being positive all the time. It's about being radically honest. The most powerful frequency you can emit is not perfection, it's truth. This is why some people can manifest with ease, even when their lives are messy, while others remain blocked despite doing all the right things. Because the first group is often in deep integrity with themselves. They are not pretending. They are not hiding. They are not negotiating their truth in order to appear evolved. Their vibration is not clean because it is flawless. It is clean because it is real. And that's the invitation, not to become more spiritual, but to become more sincere, to let go of the performance, to speak your truth even when your voice trembles, to admit when you're scared, when you're doubting, when you feel lost. Because only in that rawness can the real transformation begin. Only when you stop pretending you're already healed can the healing truly enter. It's easy to fall into the trap of comparing your journey to others, especially in a world where spiritual content floods every screen, promising instant alignment, 5-step formulas, and aesthetic bliss. But alignment is not found in curated images or polished rituals. It is found in how you speak to yourself in silence, in how you show up when no one is watching, in whether you are willing to meet the places inside you that still feel unloved, unseen, unworthy. The soul does not need a brand. It does not need a hashtag. It does not need to be marketed, elevated, or explained. It needs to be listened to. And sometimes the deepest act of manifestation is not creating vision boards or scripting your desires. It's sitting in the dark with your pain, without trying to fix it, and simply saying, I see you. I'm not leaving. Because once the soul feels safe again, safe to speak, safe to feel, safe to exist without performance, your frequency changes. And when your frequency changes, your field changes. And when your field changes, life responds. Not to the image of who you think you should be, but to the truth of who you actually are. So ask yourself gently and without judgment, are you living your truth or performing your worth? Are you embodying alignment or trying to convince yourself that you're aligned? And are you willing to release the image so that the real you, the sacred, imperfect, radiant you, can finally take root? It is not the illusion of your wholeness that manifests the life you desire. It is your courageous relationship with the parts you thought you had to hide. When you bring those parts home, when you integrate what you once abandoned, you stop vibrating from lack. You stop manifesting from fear. You begin to live from essence. And essence is the most powerful force in the universe. Inner silence, outer co-creation, the power of becoming a field of possibility, without noise, in a world saturated with stimuli, where urgency echoes louder than intuition and speed is mistaken for purpose, silence has become one of the most misunderstood forms of power. We have been conditioned to believe that manifestation is a result of constant action, persistent affirmation, and relentless focus. But in truth, the most potent manifestations often arise not from noise, but from stillness, from a silence that is not passive but alive, that listens more than it speaks, that receives more than it demands. The most magnetic people you'll ever meet are rarely the loudest. They don't need to convince, chase, or prove. Their presence speaks louder than their words. Why? Because their energy is coherent, still, uncomplicated. This inner stillness is not absence, it is alignment. It is not emptiness, it is spaciousness. And it is within this sacred spaciousness that creation truly begins. To co-create with the universe is to enter into a conversation with the unseen. But if your internal landscape is filled with static, mental chatter, emotional reactivity, over-analysis, there is no room to hear what the universe is whispering. Inner silence is not the suppression of thought, it is the reorientation of awareness, a state where your nervous system no longer panics in the unknown, a state where your energy is no longer entangled with the urgency of outcome. Greg Braden speaks of the heart as a transmitter, sending electromagnetic signals into the field, shaping the reality that unfolds around us. When the heart is coherent, calm, and present, the signal is strong. When it is noisy, conflicted, and desperate, the signal becomes scattered. The quality of your inner silence determines the quality of your transmission. And in manifestation, transmission is everything. There is a certain kind of courage required to become quiet, especially in a culture that glorifies productivity and rewards constant motion. Silence for many feels like inactivity, like giving up. But silence is not giving up, it's giving space. It's saying, I've done what I can from this level of awareness. Now I allow the intelligence of life to move through me. In this allowing, you become porous. You become a field, and fields do not force, they attract. Stillness is not something you find, it is something you uncover. It has always been there beneath the layers of resistance, beneath the armor of striving. The soul does not shout, it waits. And only when the mind grows tired enough of performing does the deeper intelligence begin to rise. This intelligence does not operate on logic. It moves like water, fluid, intuitive, non-linear. It doesn't ask what you want, it asks who you're becoming. When your inner world becomes quiet enough to hear that question, the process of co-creation begins in earnest. No longer are you placing orders to the universe like a customer at a spiritual restaurant. You are engaging, responding, participating. You begin to notice the feedback loop between your thoughts, your emotions, and your environment. You begin to refine your vibration not because you're trying to manifest something specific, but because coherence feels good, because peace becomes more attractive than the pursuit. And from that space, things begin to shift, not always dramatically, not always with fireworks, but subtly, consistently, undeniably. People who reflect your new frequency start appearing. Opportunities that felt distant begin aligning. You start seeing signs, not because you're obsessively looking for them, but because you're finally still enough to notice. Manifestation becomes less about effort and more about elegance, less about chasing and more about channeling. The paradox is that this level of co-creation only becomes possible when you stop trying to control it, when you stop asking, how can I get what I want, and start asking, what is life trying to bring through me right now? Because at the highest level of manifestation, you are not creating from desire alone, you are creating from resonance. You are tuning yourself to the deepest truth of your being, and from that truth, reality bends. This is not a concept to understand, it is a state to experience. And you can only enter that state when you no longer need to prove anything to yourself or anyone else, when you are willing to sit in the quiet without the need for immediate clarity, when you can be with the void, not as a punishment but as a birthplace. The void is not the absence of manifestation, it is the womb of it, and your ability to rest there unafraid is the mark of someone who has become truly available. Silence is not something you visit for a few minutes between to-do lists. It is a way of living, a way of being. It's found in the breath before you respond, in the pause before you act, in the willingness to be wrong, to not know, to wait without tension. And it is from that space of relaxed presence that the most astonishing manifestations arrive, quietly, gently, but profoundly. When you become a field of possibility, the universe does not need to be pushed. It recognizes your availability. It responds not to your need but to your neutrality. It honors your stillness with synchronicity. It meets your openness with opportunity. You are no longer fighting to receive. You are dancing with the unseen. So if you've been trying, forcing, pushing, obsessing, take a breath, not as a technique, but as a return to the part of you that already knows, that already trusts, that already remembers what it's like to be held by something greater. In that remembering, manifestation is no longer something you do, it's something you become. What is coming will transform you, but are you willing to let the old you die for it to arrive? There comes a moment in every transformational journey when the question is no longer, will it happen? But instead, who must I become to receive it, and who must I release to allow it in? This is not a question of strategy, timing, or discipline. It is a question of identity, of energy, of soul. And the answer to that question requires more than just reflection. It requires surrender. You have spent much of your life preparing for something greater. Perhaps you didn't always know what it was, but there's been a silent knowing, a pulse beneath the surface, that you were meant to live in deeper resonance with life, with love, with purpose. And maybe, despite your efforts, it hasn't arrived in the way you envisioned, not because you're broken, not because you're late, but because the version of you who could hold that reality is still in the process of being born. Joe Dispenza often reminds us that we don't attract what we want, we attract what we are. This means your manifestations are not the reward for hard work or spiritual performance. They are the natural consequence of coherence, of becoming energetically aligned with the version of you who no longer needs to strive, beg, or chase. That version does not operate from lack. It moves from fullness, from presence, from trust. But to step into that self, something must be released. Not forcibly, but faithfully. Perhaps it's an outdated belief, a version of you that survived but never truly lived, an identity shaped by fear, scarcity, or abandonment. These parts once served you, protected you, but now they restrict you. They are too small for the life that is trying to arrive, and so life will ask you, are you ready to let them go? Neville Goddard once wrote that imagining creates reality, but it is not enough to simply imagine. You must feel as if it is already done. To feel the end, as if it has already occurred, is to live from the fulfillment, not the absence of your desire. This is not delusion. It is vibrational alignment, and it is only possible when you stop waiting for external proof and start living from internal knowing. There is no more time to negotiate your worth, no more space to entertain doubt as a companion. The version of you that will walk into what's coming must be bold enough to leave behind the frequency of hesitation. The old self, who waited, feared, performed, clung, cannot enter the next chapter. And this is not a loss. This is sacred shedding, the way a tree releases its leaves in trust, the way the tide surrenders to the shore, the way the night becomes day without resistance. In this final breath of reflection, ask yourself not what you want, but who you're becoming. Ask not what you're manifesting, but what you're magnetizing through the silent coherence of your being. Because the truth is, you don't need to convince the universe of your readiness. You need to become the space where readiness no longer has to be proven, only lived. What is coming is vast. It is sacred. It is shaped in the unseen, and yet it already knows your name. But it will not enter a life too full of noise, too crowded with contradiction, too entangled with versions of you that were never meant to last. You must make space, not just in your schedule, but in your soul. So the question now is simple, not easy, but simple. You say you're ready for what's coming, but are you truly prepared to hold it? Are you willing to let the old version of you die, so something far more aligned, far more luminous, can finally live? Because once you say yes, genuinely, silently, wholeheartedly, that's when it arrives, and not a moment sooner. The sacred threshold. Between who you've been and who you're becoming, there's a silence that follows deep transformation, not the absence of sound, but the quiet of recognition. A sacred pause between exhale and inhale, between what has ended and what is about to begin. You may be standing in that space now, feeling the weight of all that's ready to fall away, and the trembling presence of what's finally ready to arrive. That space is not emptiness. It is initiation. It is the womb of everything you've asked for, alive, waiting, listening. What is coming is not just an event or an achievement. It's a mirror. It will reflect your wholeness, your honesty, your vibration. And if your hands are still clinging to survival, the gift cannot stay. This is not a punishment, it is divine precision. You are being invited to rise not because you're broken, but because you're ready. You're not here to endlessly heal or prove your worth. You're here to embody the truth of who you already are. Whole, powerful, and divinely supported. The universe is not asking you to strive harder. It's asking you to trust deeper, to become still enough to feel your own readiness, to become honest enough to admit where you've hidden behind control or fear, to become brave enough to receive without defense. Let go of the illusion that transformation must be loud, dramatic, or visible. Sometimes the most powerful shift is silent. A soft closing of the old chapter, a steady opening of the heart, a single choice to stop performing and finally start living. You are the doorway through which the life you long for must enter. Not later, now, but only if you're ready to hold it, not with tension but with tenderness, not with fear but with full permission. Are you willing to stop waiting for your life and finally become the one who is living it? If this message resonated with your soul, take a breath and remember, this is your time. Subscribe to the channel so we can walk this path together. There's more waiting for you on the screen right now. Watch the next video and keep awakening the frequency of who you truly are. Your life is not waiting. It's already unfolding. Keep watching. Keep remembering. You're closer than you think.